Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris. This week I'm joined by Stuart Hughes, who is the president of IOSH, as well as working for a Formula One team in his day job. And we talk a bit about IOSH, we talk about Stuart's focus for the year and his three key areas that he wants to work on. I quote back some of the things that Stuart said to him and ask him to unpack them a bit. We delve as well into the world of safety within Formula One, because this has always fascinated me as being the kind of epitome of a high performance team setting, a high performance culture. And so understanding and learning from how Stuart has tied in safety to high performance, to me, is a really, really valuable lesson for us all. So this is the third now of our annual interviews with Irish presidents. Hopefully we can keep that record going, and I'm sure you'll get a lot from this episode with Stuart Hughes, president of IOSH, and myself. Cheers.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Thanks for joining me today, Stuart.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on board.
Right, I'm going to start with a quote. We need to challenge ourselves, ask ourselves if what we're doing to protect people is working as effectively as it can. Now, that's a pretty tough statement. Who said that?
I think I might have said that.
You did say that.
Yeah.
You did say that. So I agree with you, but I think that's obviously quite a big challenge. I want to give you a bit of context. So recently, I'll be interested to get your view on this. Recently, I did a series of LinkedIn polls. I did some on my profile, some in some groups, blah, blah, blah. And I was asking people, how often when you take on a new safety role, do you find things that could be improved upon? Always, sometimes, occasionally, never. And the majority of people said always. So that suggests that we're aware that there are things that can be improved. But yet, I find it sometimes difficult to get people to do what you've said, which is to kind of look in the mirror and ask ourselves if we're doing things as effectively as we can. How do we square that circle, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's deliberately provocative in its nature to get people to, I suppose, ask the questions that you've been asking, and to have that thought process. I think if you think about occupational safety and health in its entirety, it's an infinite game. There's no finish line. You don't get to complete safety. So I'm not surprised that respondents to that question are saying they always find things that can be improved on. I think whichever environment you're in, you're probably aware of stuff you can improve on, and there's a bit of I suppose, like, when is good enough, so that you've got the capacity then to move on to the other things that need addressing, and you're kind of in that life cycle of doing those things. But I think really where I was going with that piece in particular is that actually, as a profession, if you kind of go globally, the picture's not great. In some areas of the world, the picture's getting worse. And actually, probably some of the things that have improved safety the most have been technological developments. So actually, like, are the things that, if you have an option A to go to or an option B to go to, and you always go to option A, and that delivers you a bit, and you're happy with it, like, is it worth us going, actually, is there more than just option A, or is there more than just option A and option B to have a look at and to think about these things? So recently I was reading about there's a Chinese board game called Go, which is apparently like the oldest board game ever in the world. It's been played for since humans existed, almost. That's probably not quite true, but I'd never heard of it. Anyway, this AI, they built an AI to play a grandmaster, and whilst in doing so, the AI got to move 37, and everybody that knew anything about this game said it's only got two options now. It can either go on the attack or it can make a defensive move. And the AI, which had taught itself to play, did a move that nobody had ever seen ever, and it was a completely different option.
Mm.
And that you can either kind of go, well, it's quite heartbreaking that AI can teach itself to play a game and then just outsmart, the smartest humans at the game. Or you can look at it in the other direction and go, actually, this opens up a whole new way to play that game. And I think that's where safety's got a really good opportunity now to say, actually, some of these things from the past are really effective and they work in specific environments or contexts. And there's other things there that actually, when we're making binary choices, perhaps there are alternatives that we could consider and kind of broaden, I suppose, the scope of what it is that we're applying in the world of IOSH. So I don't have all the answers for it. I'm not sure I'm the person that will tell you how to square that circle, but I think that we should be engaging in these kinds of discussions to really say, what is it that we can challenge ourselves on to say, actually, is that good enough? Could it be better? Are there different ways of doing things to achieve, an even better outcome? And I think that's, if we can do that constructively as a profession, rather than kind of these arguments where people are fixed on whether something's right or wrong, I think we'd be better off. And that's really, I suppose, when you get to a position where you have a platform and a voice, I think one of the responsibilities of that is to try and do something with it. And that was probably on my mind when I wrote those words.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with that. And I think it's important as well to bear in mind the context, isn't it? Because if someone's gone into this profession, they're doing it from a place of wanting to help and support and protect other people. So everyone's coming at it with the right kind of intentions. So it's important not to criticize people. And everyone's doing, a good job, and they're doing the best job they can in the circumstances. So I suppose it's about getting people to be open to sort of just taking that step back, having a bit more perspective, learning from other industries, learning from contemporaries, trying different things, having some courage. A lot of this soft skill stuff, isn't it?
I think that there's all of those things, isn't it? I don't think, we've probably got to have you've got to have quite a thick skin to work in safety, because it's got a fairly bad image reputation as kind of getting in the way or stopping people from doing stuff. And I think it's completely the opposite. I think it's like such an enabling profession. When you think about some of the kind of, I suppose, the advances or some like kind of amazing feats of engineering and stuff, like, there'll be an infinite amount of safety calculations, thought and risk management into SpaceX and the stuff that they're doing, within NASA, and having, learned lessons the hard way as well. And it's really important. And I think there's an obligation on us to not forget that, as things have advanced, that has been at the expense of, humans' lives. And we owe it to them not to let safety kind of get dragged into this position where it's just saying no to everything, and actually for it to be this enabling profession where you go, actually, we're a conduit within the organization to give it some form of ethical conscience, to challenge and to question, but to do that in a way that is about saying yes to getting things done. But there's always a but, isn't there? So if you want to do something, tell me how. Talk us through what you've done from a risk management perspective. What are the things that you've thought about? Are there some things we haven't thought about that we need to control? And I think it's not more complicated than that. And I think that, what I'm not saying is safety is doing a terrible job across the globe. What I am saying is, if we're reaching plateaus, or statistically we're still harming year after year the same number of people, is that good enough? And if it's not good enough, how do we get better? And I think that quest to get better, I think, is what I think is a really exciting point at the moment. I think the adoption of new technologies, if it's done with societal benefit and human protection in mind, we've got a really good opportunity to really change the way that work's delivered, how people are protected, removing some of the stresses and strains from the working environment. And I know that's probably quite a luxury in some parts of the world to be thinking of that, when in other parts of the world you've got people that are operating, without the bare essentials for, even protective equipment, or,
Yeah,
generally
true.
a safe working environment. So it's very hard when you start to kind of come out and look at a big global landscape. But I think, where you've got the opportunity to adopt these things and push new things forward, I think we should be doing that, understanding what works, and then understanding the ways to disseminate that at a quicker rate to help people, move out from what's probably a very poor baseline.
Yeah. Now, what you said there actually was a really good segue into what I was going to ask you about next. And I've got another quote from you. This isn't going to be all quotes from you, but I really like this one, so I had to use it. It's from your LinkedIn profile, and I was fascinated by this. So, what you say about your role currently with Mercedes is you direct the health and safety strategy and drive performance improvement to deliver a competitive advantage, and that ties in exactly with what you were just saying. So this to me is music to my ears. Um, do you think that safety is really as important as that? And has that been something that culturally was in the organization before, or have you helped to sort of shape that during your time there?
I do think it's as important as that. I think, like, fundamentally, if I take my organization, its power is through its intelligence and capabilities from its human performance. And if we don't provide the right environments, the right ability, the right kind of, I suppose, the settings for people to be able to perform at their best, and we don't generate the culture where people are able to critique things in the right way, to raise issues comfortably without the kind of fear of being jumped on and lambasted for it. Like, if we have a saying that we blame the problem, not the person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really powerful, I think, because actually it's really easy to fix a problem. It's a lot harder to fix a person. And if you remove the kind of emotion out of it, and actually all you're dealing with is how do we rectify the issue, I think that's really, I just feel it's really, really powerful. So I think culturally, obviously, I joined an organization that had, a focus on reliability,
Mm-hmm.
on the quality of the end product and the processes that everything went through. And it was really easy in my mind to see a link between those things and safety. So I looked for the opportunities of alignment. I took language that already existed within, I suppose, on-car fault systems and also off-car, and said, right, I can convert that language into meaningful metrics for safety.
Yeah.
I'm not bringing anything new because it's all stuff you already talk about. And then culturally, we said, right, okay, let's start being really open about these things. What's not good enough? What can we improve? You know, and it's been a journey. I got I it was a really big challenge that I took on when I joined the team. I didn't know, I didn't have anything behind me that said I could do it. So I'd
Yeah.
been environmental health officer, I'd enforced the law, I'd been working in operational context within the waste management industry. So I'd got that kind of operational experience. I've been doing some consultancy, worked with KPMG. So I'd kind of, I suppose, grown in that kind of audit piece, and also some of the kind of senior management or board level engagement. And all of that combines into this like package that arrived at Mercedes, and I got a blank piece of paper and got to build from scratch. And I had the belief I could do it, but I didn't have any evidence behind me to know that I would be able to do it. So yeah, I had to try and find like what were the shortcuts to get some really quick engagement. How was the way to set your tone about what kind of safety person you were and what was important. How much stuff could we say yes to, and then work out the framework you put around it to make sure that we were still safe and within the margins of all of the sporting regulations and the safety regulations and all of those things. And yeah, culturally it was, people work as a team. Everybody understands what their part does in terms of delivering on track performance, even if you're quite distant from the car itself. And everybody knows the reliance of all of those parts coming together. So actually talking about, helping people to make the right decisions, speeding some of those things up, slowing some of those things down, but to ultimately make them faster in the long term. There was some cultural stuff we had to shift around, some mindsets to change, I think, on some of the aspects. But yeah, it was probably a, you don't know until you're doing it, do you? Just kind of
Yeah.
what you're walking into and what you've got. And then I had a few different things that acted as real big catalysts fairly early on. Had some opportunities to I suppose prove my worth, and got really good buy-in. I think from a leadership perspective, having people that you all understand ultimately what you're trying to do. You're trying to demonstrate performance on a stopwatch, right? That's fundamentally everybody's aim, and then you've got to tie what your bid is into that delivery of performance. And I think as long as people can understand how you come to that objective, it's quite easy to buy into. And the organisation's been very good. They come and talk to me. They tell me what they want to do, and then we find the way to do it. I think that's the biggest fun part of that challenge.
No, it's fascinating for me because, I suppose my two kind of passions, I guess, are safety and business. And if you look at, how do you define a high performance team? Probably in the top two or three things that anyone would think of if you stopped 1,000 people on Oxford Street and asked them that question would be an F1 team. And so kind of bringing those two things together to me is really, really interesting because I still think that the safety profession is not quite as good as it could be at sort of proving itself, acting as and becoming an enabler for that high performance. And so I think the lessons from what you're doing is really interesting because if I'm reading what you're saying right, safety is a key component of driving that high performance on those outcomes. And if it works in an F1 team where everyone buys into that being one of the most high performance environments ever, then it should be the same in other businesses as well. And that should be a good lesson for us.
Yeah, and I think you can extrapolate it out. I don't, fundamentally, you put two very talented individuals into, a machine that's been designed to perform to its absolute optimum, and you want to protect those people. So, there's lots of safety critical componentry and design, in that engineering process, in much the same way that, moving people around in larger transport items, happens. But then also you think about all the small kind of bits that add up into it. And I think, it's part of the high performance ecosystem. I think, a healthy workforce, that's highly motivated, highly skilled, that you're looking after in the best way possible is going to give you, its very best. And that's what you're trying to achieve. Now, it does drive a friction point because there are challenges when that mindset is in place and people, go the extra mile or potentially step outside of their competencies to do things for the benefit of the team that can potentially put themselves in harm's way. And that's probably one of the biggest friction points of a push and pull within safety, of how you enable all of that stuff to happen, but give people enough of a boundary so that they know not to go over those confines, because that's the bit where we potentially put ourselves in harm's way. And that's a challenge, that without a shadow of a doubt, that's a challenge. And you don't want safety to kill all of that discretionary effort, but you also don't want people to have a really significant life-changing injury as a result of just trying to go the extra mile. So that's an interesting dichotomy that it's a constant battle.
Yeah, and it is a great analogy, isn't it, for that, what you do, because you are pushing the machine and the technology to its limits to try and get it to go as fast as possible. You're pushing the driver to their limits, to achieve that same objective. And so that kind of culture is there of we're striving for excellence, but it's kind of we can't, if we go, if we push that machine too far, then something will break and we'll be out. And if we push the driver to, so it's kind of, constantly pushing, but also having those, as you say, those boundaries. So you're stepping on the line, but not over the line, I guess.
Yeah,
And
it's all about
that
the
must be
edge.
interesting. Yeah, yeah.
All about the edge, like how you've got to get to, you want to be on the edge, but not, too far over, and it's all off, and nobody's happy about it. But if you're, a fraction under it, you're leaving performance behind, and that's a very, it's ingrained within the mindset of the organisation. And obviously they've had a period of great success, and then things loop round in the sport, and things might not go your way. Other people do a better job than you, which you have to respect. And then the challenge comes again to find your way to that perfect balance point on the edge, and that's why it's really exciting environment to be in. That constant, it almost feels constantly new, which is
very dynamic. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just that's one of the things I really enjoy about it. That rapid rate of change, it means that you'd never get really bored of what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. No, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I've listened to podcasts with business leaders from F1 before, and it is just fascinating how the business works. So yeah, it's I'm jealous of you to get to live and breathe that all the time. So that's good. That's good stuff. So turning to IOSH a bit, then, how does it feel to kind of take on the mantle and the responsibility of it, but also I suppose the privilege of being the president?
Yeah, it's really humbling. I think you get put there ultimately by your peers, and my journey to that was, I don't know, it probably not a normal journey, if you like. I got to a point in my career where I wanted to start giving back, and got engaged with IOSH through their performance and development committee. And then one of my mentors was on the presidential team and was going into their presidential year, so I wanted to support them. So I applied for the kind of vice president's position there. I'd been on the outside of IOSH for a while. I suppose I've been a little bit critical in my thought, and somebody challenged me and said, "Well, like, it's great that you've got all of this, but what are you going to do about it?" And that's the thing that lit the touch paper for me. And I was
get inside
involved.
the tent, and get inside the tent rather than doing the proverbial from outside the tent. Yeah.
And that was pretty much exactly what they told me. And I was like, okay, well, let's get involved. And then the more I've been involved, the more I've learned through the process. More I understand what the organisation's trying to do, how it's trying to grow, what it's trying to deliver for the benefit of its members, and the value within the volunteer network of what other people do to help people in their profession. And all of that was super inspiring. I spent 3 years being a vice president. I suppose really getting my understanding of governance, how it all works. It's quite complex, but doing all of that stuff, and then went for the presidency. And there you are, got voted in. Have a year as president-elect, kind of preparing and getting used to the kind of that next level. And then this year it's challenging, I think, because you're a focal point and everybody kind of asks you, well, what are you going to do? And you think you're one person who's volunteering their time,
and you've only got a year.
You've only got a year. You've got to be realistic about what you can do. But I think for me, it's not necessarily about what you do, maybe outcome wise, but perhaps some of the things the paths that you forge for other people to follow. What I'd really hope is, I think I'm the youngest person to hold the position. I'd really hope that other people want to get engaged with IOSH, want to give back to the profession, and want to take those steps to see it's possible. I would tell you, well, I would tell anybody, like, I'm not particularly anything special. There's probably better people out in the safety world with more experience or, you know, deeper knowledge of stuff or done more qualifications or all of those things. But I genuinely believe that I could, you know, try and make a difference, represent the profession in an interesting way. Obviously, I'm in an interesting job in my day job, so hopefully, you know, leverage some of that to kind of give people a different perspective on what the profession is and what it can be. And then, I think, you know, you obviously you get to, they ask you what you want your themes to be. And you know, for me, it was very much like IOSH is a membership body. Like, it's got to be about the members, and particularly for me, the people that engage with IOSH in such a way that they give their time up freely for the benefit of the other members. So recognizing the value in the membership network in terms of the volunteers, I think that's really, really important. And I think we need to do more of that so people understand just how much other people do for them. The profession as a whole. So I think we need a greater use of research into turning that into useful instruments of practice. So how do we take some of the great research that's already done and turn that into things that are useful today? And what are the questions that we need to ask today for the benefit of the profession in the future and for the benefit of the membership? And then from a societal piece, I think we need to elevate health and safety. So it's been a poor cousin, I think, of safety for far too long. So I think health's your foundation stone for every other element of your life. So we should really, you know, be promoting that. And then, the societal impact of occupational safety and health. I think if more people understood that narrative of actually, you know, I go to work in an environment, I'm able to thrive there, I can do good work, I get paid fairly, I get treated justly, and I come home and I'm still able to contribute to my family, to society. I think if people understood that was the ripple effect of what's in place within organisations to enable that to happen, we might have a better reputation within the kind of mind's eye of the public. So they're kind of the three things that are really important to me. And I think three is one that's easy for me to remember because I'm a simple creature, so I can at least kind of, you know, say those things with a good regularity. But they're achievable in terms of making some form of dent towards them. And also other people can carry them on in the future as well. So, you know, I think the presidential role is about you get given a position, you inherit it in the condition that it's in, and it's your job to at least look after it and make sure it's in as good a condition, you know, as that good a condition as you got it, but hopefully like a little bit better, and you each lay a foundational stone for the next person to build something on.
That makes sense, and I think you're spot on that. You know, having that perspective of, you know, it's a fleeting moment, but actually it's kind of what can you do, I guess, to influence people to think and act slightly differently, isn't it? And persuade and cajole, and that's all you can really do. You know, it's not like you're hands-on rolling your sleeves up and actually doing stuff in that role. It's a kind of ambassadorial, influential role, isn't it?
Yeah, you get two roles. You know, it's a 2-for-1 job. So you get the visible stuff, the ambassadorial things, the turning up and talking at events, and you know, all of that great stuff, which is, you know, really interesting. And, you know, I think actually promoting some of the work that IOSH isn't always great at promoting, you know, some of the work that they've done in terms of helping the Ukraine deal with asbestos contamination due to, you know, the conflict. You know, that's, you know, IOSH members should be really proud of the fact that work's been undertaken, and IOSH are helping to facilitate that. And we don't talk about it enough. So there's things like that that's obviously in the role. And then the other side of it is you're the chair of council. So you take, you know, the members' voice that comes through the membership, through our branches and through our sector groups, to the councillors, that, you know, we talk about key issues within the council meetings, you know, produce papers and take those to board and influence the direction of IOSH that way. So it's a 2-part role. I think probably, you know, the ambassadorial side of stuff is the bit that I suppose most people see. And then the kind of chair of council role is probably more critical to the nuts and bolts of the organisation, but perhaps not as visible as it should be. And one of the things I'd like to, look back on at the end of the tenure is to say that actually we improved those connections and the links between, the members and the council and ultimately the board. So just strengthening that two-way communication. So there's quite a lot in there to do, but you just chip away, don't you? Take it each day at a time, and as long as you're clear on the direction that you're traveling in, I think you've got a good chance of making an impact.
Yeah, and balancing that as doing the day job as well, which is not easy. So yeah, hats off to you for that dedication.
I think when I took on the role and did my handover speech, like, I've got a family, I've got a day job. I like both of those, and I'd quite like to keep them. And then you give your best with whatever else you can. And that's the role of volunteering, isn't it? And it's not just me. There's another 5 members of the presidential team, so making sure we spread that workload out and give people their fair turn and chance at doing all of the activities and pieces. But yeah, I think it's just recognizing that there's a massive amount of value in that volunteer network, and giving people the credit for the work that they do. I get the nice bit, I suppose, of being in that, I suppose, that elevated position, but I recognize that it's not built from what I'm doing. It's built from the impact of all of those people that contribute to it, and it's my job to represent that in the best way possible. And that's what I'll try to do. 50,000 members, you can't please everybody, but I do feel that IOSH has got a very important mission. A safer world of work for everybody is a very strong ambition. And I think that there's a whole generation of people that will be coming into work and into employment in the future that are very conscious about societal impacts and the purpose of what they're doing. And we should be right up there of things that they want to do, because you can genuinely make a difference to people's lives, and their environment. So I think, feel if there's nothing else, we've got an obligation to really celebrate what we're about, and make it an attractive place for that next generation to come into.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we had as you know, I put a call out on LinkedIn for some questions, and one of the good questions that we got, I tried to incorporate a few of them in various ways, but was along those lines of, what do you see that businesses will be, or organizations will be, looking for from OSH professionals, in, let's say, 5 years' time, and what can we do, and what steps are being taken by IOSH to help to kind of give that platform to meet those needs?
Yeah, I think trying to make predictions can be a bit of a fool's errand, can't it? So if you'd have asked me that question in 2019 and I'd give you some answers, I'd look quite foolish now. But I think things that are super clear is that from a climate perspective, the impact of climate change is going to have an impact on the world of work. So we need to have an awareness there. I think there is a healthy vehicle in terms of ESG, and particularly the kind of social and the governance pieces there to further the OSH agenda and to I suppose cement that in senior leadership and kind of board level conversations. And then I think the adaptation or implementation of technology is another key bit. So I think what are the skills that a safety professional needs to have in 5 years from now? I think there's an ability to talk the language of business. There's an ability to align in terms of how do you make your priorities kind of come together and communicate with what it is that the business is trying to do. How do you deliver OSH in a sustainable way? that enhances the sustainability of an organisation. I think a lot of the softer skills as well. I think like that ability to communicate across multiple generations is going to be really, really important. If, the 10, 15 years from now, like the landscape of the workforce is going to look a lot different. It's such a big stretch of people. So I think, the softer side of things. And I think what IOSH has done in terms of the changes that it's made to what's available in CPD, in terms of the way that it's communicating and remapping the professional journey. I think the fact that we've now got this experiential route where we can bring people in, not just because of their qualifications, but because of their experience, opens this up. And I think the other thing that we need to do is to connect this, diverse range of professionals, so that we've got these communities of practice, so that actually, rather than 1,000 people reinventing the same way of doing something, that actually we're helping people to communicate, sharing the knowledge from those experienced practitioners that have been there and learned, some of the things the hard way, to expedite that knowledge. So I think that those are some of the things that I suppose immediately spring to mind. I think, without a shadow of a doubt, we don't want to lose sight of the fact that, from a work perspective, we should be focusing on stopping people from getting life-changing ill health or life-changing injuries as a result of their work. And I think that's got to be a core fundamental and never disappear. So, fundamentally, if I was leading an organisation in 5 years' time, I'd want my IOSH professionals to be focused on that reduction of harm, plus then the additional bits of how they add value into the organisation. And I think that's the seesaw we need to balance.
Yeah, and actually your three kind of areas of focus almost work as a nice flywheel, don't they, in this situation? Because if you're recognizing the members, supporting the members, getting learnings from them and sharing, that's developing people's skills and knowledge and abilities, including the soft skills, and that means that they can make that impact on broadening and deepening society's understanding and educating on the values, and then it sort of carries on as a nice flywheel. So I think that works together nice and neatly.
Yeah, and it's intentional by design that those things can continue, and also we owe it, don't we? I think, like, if I look back and think about kind of the time where everybody went after safety and it was the butt of all of the jokes and all of that stuff, like, we should have stood up for ourselves a bit more. We should have been challenging those things, because it's not right. And I think now, like, if somebody makes a quip about what I do, I challenge it, because I think it's not just me. Like, it's actually my whole profession, and it's all those people that are out there doing their best for the benefit of others, and we just make a joke of it, and like, it doesn't sit very well with me. And I think we can demonstrate, each of us, has an obligation in the way that we interact and what we do and what we deliver to enhance the reputation of the profession, because that's what people remember. They remember how you treated them. They remember how, hard you worked to achieve the outcome. They remember the difference that you made. Those are the things that will change people's minds.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing a lot fewer of the kind of health and safety gone mad headlines and things like that, aren't we? Which is good. You do see the odd one. Although I think sometimes these things aren't driven by health and safety. It's just used as an excuse to get a headline. But I suppose, looking at that positive sense, I think that's where, for me, the kind of middle part of our conversation around what you're doing and driving high performance through safety, that's where that kind of needs to be, have a light shone on it more, because I think that's how we can gain more and more influence with the boards and the C-suites and the decision makers. If we can, as you said earlier, speak the language of business, figure out, like you did, what the terminology is, what the outcomes are, and sort of transplant safety onto those as a driver and an enabler of them. I think that's where we can make the biggest difference. How would you kind of encourage people to, because you've kind of done this, how would you sort of encourage people to try and go on that journey, and what would be the benefits of that they would see from their own personal perspective in terms of their career advancement and getting things done, but also, as we talked about, the kind of societal and professional benefits of that.
It's going to sound counterintuitive, I suppose, but probably don't talk about safety. Like, my first 3 months in my organization, I was just hyper curious. I wanted to know how things worked, what went together, what was difficult for people, and some of those things had nothing to do with safety, but they were interesting, and some of them had lots to do with safety, but we didn't talk about it from a safety perspective. We just kind of spoke about, well, what's going on in your work environment, what's happening, like where are the things that are difficult. If time, money, wasn't an obstacle, what would be the one thing you'd change? And it just built up this picture of what the opportunities were. And then it was a case of trying to align the senior leadership around, like, well, where do we want to be? What is the vision? Like, if the Rolls-Royce standard is up here, and but actually you don't think that's a worthwhile endeavor getting to, because ultimately the last little bit of that might not, there might not be the performance gains in it that are worthwhile. How far is it along there that you want to go? I think, like, really try and understand other people's perspectives. So I get into your operations and find out what it is that causes them a hard time, which part of a month or a quarterly work cycle is particularly difficult. What are the challenges that they have? Some of the things that were fairly obvious was actually, if you're dealing with a quality issue, that time and attention and observation to stuff can actually be, unearth some safety things as well. So I think really exploring, your organization and trying to get that alignment piece, really trying to understand other people's problems and how what you're doing might help, solve some of those problems. I think, not trying to launch things when people are really busy doing other stuff. Is probably quite having a respect for other people's workloads. And I think sometimes in safety, you can get so caught up on it being the single biggest issue, you forget that, a head of department or a sector lead or something has got, another 30 other competing priorities. And actually, what are the things that I can do to make this an easier one to implement than some of the others? And actually,
or align it alongside. It's kind of the thing I always say to people to think about is, if you were trying to sell somebody something in a corporate setting, you would look at the kind of organizational objectives and blockers, but you'd also look at the personal objectives and blockers for that individual. And I think figuring out what's in it for them as an individual as well is really important. So what are the pains, what are the gains, and how can you align what you can deliver for them to help them to achieve those things or get away from those things? And that's a great way of embedding safety into those business outcomes.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is to not think that you have all the answers, right? Like, go ask really good questions. Like, we ended up saving 2 days of time on a build process, from simply asking, if we made these changes to make the environment better for the individual to work in, like, what would that take? And having asked that question, there was a full redesign of the unit, and that full redesign of the unit, like, saved 2 days worth of time to set up that specific test. But that's massively efficient, and we solved a health and safety issue in it. But in trying to do that, we also solved all of these other inefficiencies that nobody had flagged up in that first bit, but it gave the opportunity to explore. And I think if you're super curious and you're prepared to, I go and sit in rooms full of really smart people, and it's really hard for me to even pretend to know, some of the things that they're on about, and I have to, ask for a dumbed down version. But actually, that really helps, because if they can't dumb it down and explain it to me, then that kind of gives me an inkling that there might be something not quite right. And when sometimes they're doing that simplification, we actually come to some solutions that we might not have done, because we're kind of, you're having to force yourself to come out of all of the things that and you assume other people know, to translate it in a way that makes it easier. and that's been really, really helpful. I think that's I think it's just trying to be a fairly decent human, work out where you can be helpful, be prepared to say I don't know, and then also if you tell someone that you're going to go and do something, make sure you do it, and you build your reliability. People know that you're honest, and they know that if you don't know something, you'll go away and do your best to find out. And I think those are the things that every time you do something like that, you build capital in the bank, and that compound interest grows over time. And then all of a sudden, when you need to make a big withdrawal of it because there's an issue somewhere, people are really willing to help you. So there are probably some things I'd say to people entering into the profession or wanting to work out how they might stand out from the crowd.
Words to live by, indeed. That's some great advice there. So conscious of time, before we bring things to a close, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to get in any kind of plugs for webinars, events, campaigns, anything that you're up to, anything that you want to highlight that IOSH are up to, and then also a bit of a rallying call for people to get involved. How where can people get involved? What can people be doing? How should they go about doing it? And where can they find some information?
Cool. Okay. So I think that one of the things obviously I'm quite keen on is making people feel like it's worthwhile joining IOSH and wanting to contribute and I suppose bring their value. There's lots of ways to do it. So experienced people can join and do mentoring, and you can find out about kind of the three kind of steps of mentoring that we have in terms of what might be a normal mentoring process, reverse mentoring, and some of the peer-to-peer learning. That's all available on the IOSH website. I think if there's any people that are new to the profession and they want to join a community of people that are in a similar stage, then you've got the Future Leaders community. You can find them on LinkedIn, but also, again, jump on the IOSH website and search for the Future Leaders, and you can connect in that way. Obviously, students, if you're studying and you're interested, or you're kind of going through your studies and it's not in safety, but you're kind of thinking, oh, safety is interesting to me, we offer student membership. So it's great to develop some of those relationships. And then I think if people have moved away from IOSH, I'd challenge people to kind of come back to it. I think I see people say things, like, oh, the magazine's rubbish. There's not an article in there that I'd read. And I think, well, write one.
Volunteer to write one,
yeah. Come and contribute. If you want to join in at a seminar, or if you think that you've got something that you think, as a profession we should be talking about, reach out to people on council, go to your local branch, join one of the special the sector groups. The sector groups are fascinating. Like, there's some really impressive ones out there. The railway industries one is fabulous. There's been some great work done by the fire group, and there's a whole host of others, aviation, sports grounds, etc. There's like 18 of them. They're all good opportunities to engage,
and they're all looking for it. I can tell you from experience, if you contact a group or a branch and you pitch an idea of a talk, they're all ears, because they want to deliver good educational and interesting sessions for their members.
Yeah, and I think you've got your focus area, haven't you? On the slip risk, and that's I think what you bring to it and highlight in a very specific area. Great, let's go and get that out to the membership. But there'll be 100 other versions of you with their topics that they've gone really deep on, and actually that knowledge transfer is really valuable. And we're always open to hearing from these people and getting them on board. I think the other bits are engaged. I love the fact that you can just have this conversation on a podcast. I love the fact that there's a different range of them. I encourage people to listen and read much more broadly than in safety.
Follow James Pomeroy.
Yeah, if you want to expand your mind and get confused,
I was thinking,
he's a wonderful thinker.
when you were saying about being in a room full of really smart people and not really understanding what was going on, I was thinking, hey, it's a bit like reading James's posts sometimes.
You do have to, sometimes you have to do a few rereads as well, don't you? But also what I do find is if you say, I'm not really sure I understand this, the really good people that have really got a good handle on what they're trying to communicate and pass on will help you. They will do some simplification of stuff, and I think that's really cool. Now, kind of nod my cap to people like James who do that good work. I've got a really interesting session during the Safety Expo that's in Birmingham at the end of April, beginning of May. We're doing an ethics panel there. We've got an ethicist from Leeds University. We've got some other people, so a campaigner that's kind of done a lot of work around Grenfell. We've got Simon, who you've interviewed a couple of times.
Done a couple of interviews with Simon. Yeah,
he's going to be on that panel as well. So that's going to be a really interesting topic, and I think that's really it's very topical at the moment in terms of ethics and its impact and considerations for the profession. So I'm quite excited to be delivering that. And then I've got through the IOSH podcast, we're going to do a series of interviews with CEOs, so that we can help understand from the very top of organisations what it is that they need from the safety profession, and how our messaging can get there. So I'm really excited. I think that's, not everybody gets the experience to be in the room with those people and hear from them. So I think disseminating that will be really, really interesting. There's a webinar series that we're going to be doing slightly later in the year, focusing on elevating health. So looking forward to delivering that. And I think, keep an eye on the events pages on IOSH. Follow them on LinkedIn, see where the presidential team are out and about, and come and talk to us. We're always open for conversation, for hearing from the members and getting that insight. And that's the stuff that helps us to try and steer the improvements and make a difference in the organisation.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Stuart. Really enjoyed it. Some great topics and learnings and insights you've shared. So really appreciate that. And thanks for joining Stuart and I, and we'll see you on another episode soon.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.